Good morning, sir. Mr. Paul Lارودي, the administrator of U.S. anti-imperialist non-profit organization that supports the resistance worldwide, and you're also a well-known human rights activist. Thank you for this interview. I would like to ask first about your last visit to Syria, and what was it about, and how you think this will be helpful to the Syrian people?
Yes, well, we had a very successful visit in Syria, as far as I could tell. It advanced our objective of demonstrating on a relatively small scale, because we're not a big organization, that a U.S. organization can be in solidarity with the Syrian people throughout the entire country, that has liberated many different parts. But these parts of the country now, many of the Syrians have fled the country because of the lack of economic advantage, and because of the war, of course. I mean, the war had a powerful economic impact on the country. So. We get in the United States a lot of appeals to help Syrians, but these appeals come from organizations that are supportive of the people who live among the terrorists, who are mostly the terrorists themselves, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and all these other groups. And so when people donate to these organizations, their money goes essentially to a very small portion of Syrians who are against the central government. The central government has more than 90% of the population of Syria as it remains now. And we felt the need to show that donors, when they want to send their money to help the people of Syria, there are so many who are so needy, especially because of the sanctions that the United States is imposing on Syria, and of all the other countries who join with the United States to cause this damage to Syria. So we're a small organization, but we want to show that even an organization, a U.S. organization in the middle of the United States, can provide aid and defy, in a sense, the sanctions that are imposed on Syria. And we do this by actually abiding by the sanctions laws, but finding ways through the sanctions laws. And this is important for at least to show the principle, and to educate the American people, for that matter, to show that, and to show the Syrian people that we are with them, and that we want to work with them.
Did you benefit from the U.S. decision to halt the sanctions after the earthquake?
It didn't make very much difference, but it made a difference in our case, because one of the principles of the sanctions is that we are not allowed, for example, to distribute aid through organizations like the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and other charity organizations in Syria, because they're Syrian organizations. The United States requires us to deliver it personally. The suspension of some principles of the sanctions helped us to actually give money to Syrian organizations. We raised money for Syrian organizations, and we were able to distribute it. This is our interpretation of the sanctions. But generally speaking, for example, if we want to move money to Syria, there's no way to do it, because there are no relations between the Syrian banks and the banks outside Syria. And it's very difficult to find ways to get supplies and aid into Syria, even if you have the right to do it. So technically, it made almost no difference in the amount of aid going to Syria, except coming from other countries. There are other countries that sent aid to Syria, but otherwise, no.
So how were you able to do this? How were you able to deliver money to Syrian people, or it's classified?
No, it's not classified at all. I brought the money with me in my hand.
Oh.
And this is, in fact, the way most of the volunteers outside Syria provide money to Syria. You can't move it electronically very easily. So that's what we do. That's the only way.
Who is acting now? Who is really working for this right now?
Well, there is a large part of the Syrian expatriate community that is trying to help their brothers and sisters in Syria. But in addition, there are more and more of the Western population, let's say, who hear on the news and in the newspapers terrible things about what's happening in Syria. But I have seen, and many others have seen, a lot of lies being perpetrated about Syria, and we can prove it. We have the evidence of the deception of the Organization for the Protection for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. For example, it's a fraud, and I have to say that an awful lot of the news in the Western media is fraud. It's fraudulent, and it comes from the opposition, the violent opposition, the terrorists, many of whom are not Syrians.
How did the Western audience deal with this accusations of using chemical weapons in Syria by the government? Was the Western media able to make those people believe that the government of Syria used chemical weapons?
Absolutely, absolutely. There was, it was plainly demonstrated by researchers such as Aaron Mate and others that there's no evidence of the Syrian government use of chemical weapons. But it doesn't matter what the truth is, because the United States pressured the OPCW to come to a conclusion that was against the advice of their own inspectors, and to say that there was evidence that the Syrian government had used chemical weapons. Well, there isn't any, but it's enough for them to say it, and for the news in the West to report it that way, and to ignore the evidence that is contrary to that. I mean, it's been Aaron Mate has testified at the United Nations multiple times to show that this is the case, but you don't see it in the American news or the Western news.
Maybe the NGOs that operated in Syria, such as White Helmets and other NGOs, also had an impact and an influence regarding how the audience deals with this news, right?
They are the source of the news. The White Helmets and their allied organizations are, in effect, the reporters on the ground. Yes. And I happen to know, I'll tell you her name, Saleha Hassan, from the BBC in London. She went early in the war, 10 years ago, and she, as far as I can tell, there's a strange connection between her making a film on how to put fake wounds and for purposes of teaching paramedics how to respond to emergencies. And soon after that, she went to Turkey and then into Syria illegally. And soon after that, the White Helmets began producing videos of people with fake wounds. And this is the kind of thing that they've been. Also, of course, there were deaths of journalists in the beginning of the war, which discouraged journalists from going there. As a result, the news media began to rely not upon their own journalists or even attested journalists, but rather on reporters, the combatants themselves.
Exactly. So, those combatants are, of course,
Like the White Helmets and the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and the other Al-Qaeda affiliated groups.